They call you Gloria, and as the thumbnail already shows us, you are Moto. Some even call you Edna, which is funny enough because that means pleasure. And later on into the video, you're going to end up seeing just how much you like to pleasure yourself. You brag that Calligraph and Bien call you Sweetie, others call you Rhea, maybe because you spoke about diarrhea and intercourse in the same sentence on a post on Twitter. Anyway, you were born in the city of Nairobi, Kenya, to two kissy parents, and they were more violent than they were kissy. You shared a tribe with the legendary Kipchoge, which makes sense as to why you had it in your blood to run away from home, but that's a more sensitive topic we'll dive into later. You were born on April 19, 1991, when Kenya was still a one-party state ruled by Daniel Arap Moi and his Kenyan African Union. Even the World Bank and the IMF started threatening suspending financial assistance to Kenya due to human rights abuses and the lack of democratic progress, which makes you wonder if they did it just to replace the system with their own, or they genuinely had concerns. Speaking of corruption, you weren't the most obedient child in high school. You were kicked out of multiple schools, and one was because you were the Malcolm X of snack time. You led a riot in school when they removed one of your favorite meals from the school shop at your boarding school. It's a little extreme, but in a boarding school with limited options, I understand the pain and I vouch for it. The rise became so overwhelming to the point that the school had to create a bigger issue of the incident just to get you out in case you got fed properly and started thinking about more sophisticated rights for other issues. You see, you attended two high schools, Northgate High School and Daystar Academy. You later joined a radio production course in Multimedia University, despite your father urging you to take a course in Kenyan School of Law. You actually wanted to be a psychologist, but money was tight, so that couldn't happen. You also have talent in sketch art as well as gymnastics, and which I hope to God you're using for the right purpose. When all failed, you washed clothes, worked at a massage parlor, and even did online writing to get money. This was at the same time that you moved in with your mom. This was after your parents separated due to physical and verbal abuse when you still resided with your father. The violence was so bad that you even had to tell your dad that he needs to stop because he might kill you one day in all the rage, and he'll find himself waking up with a dead body of his daughter. This statement alone left your dad in silence. You had two siblings, one stepsister and a brother. You're the oldest. On the day you left your dad's home in Form 4, your little brother tried protecting you from your father's violence. He was dragging you by your feet at 2 a.m. only for him to get slapped out of the way. You and your brother went to the police station, and the police stated that they can't help domestic violence cases and you should go back home to your father. You ended up looking for a phone to call your mom, and luckily that night you ended up sleeping at a neighbor's place. Your mother sadly contracted HIV, which led you to stay with your grandma, who was now responsible of taking care of the hospital bills as well as herself and yourself. One might think that you were still a new cat in the rap game, but all this was happening while you were signed to Sony. We will get into your beef with Sony, but you tried your best and you even did online writing trying to help your mom in her deathbed. Sadly, she passed on and Sony didn't even seem like they gave a damn. But those late nights of studying for online writing, getting that jawline from eating Jabba all night, they didn't go to waste. You decided to create Juice. The Jabba juice. See, Jabba is a plant that when you chew, you stay alert, and you probably shit a lot. And that information is from a friend. But anyway, you started a business called Kitu Jabba, your first business. But let's dive into how a 20-year-old landed a deal with Sony and why they chose you. You began singing at the age of 13 and transitioned from singing into rapping at the age of 16. You beatboxed at Wapi because you were too shy to rap and even attended MC Africa to watch, but ended up in the cyphers due to popular demand, as you were already gaining traction from your collabs with artists like Sniper Ganji, who was the first person you made music with, introduced to you by your friend Lillian. At the time, you were more of a singer than a rapper. You even had two collabs with Rabbit, now known as King Kak. After all this exposure in the industry, Sony came knocking. Remember, they didn't come to build you, they came after you already had traction. But you stated that you actually thought it was an April Fool's joke, but it was legit. I'm sure now you wish it was an April Fool's joke knowing what you know now. You were signed at 20 to Sony for a multi-album deal. Notice I didn't say multi-million. Understand what I mean? You didn't get your own lawyer. You got Nick, who was managing your music, to get you a lawyer. Big mistake. The problem with you is that you don't want to accept that you messed up. And on an interview with Fancy TV, you said that you wish you could change one clause. Then you retracted that statement to say that that you wish you could change 2 clauses, and then you flipped the entire script later on the My Chick podcast to say that you didn't see a problem with the contract you signed, stating that if the label could only just help with the money and then the money will come in. This shows that you don't understand anything about the contract to this day. Let's look at the terms that you signed. You signed a 4,000 deal for a 5-year 360 multi-album deal. That means that's about $5,644 in today's purchasing power for a 360 multi-album deal. Crazy, for 5 years. This was a horrible deal, and you still refuse to accept your mistake in each and every podcast, stating that it wasn't a dumb deal. You just need support from the label, which is funny because you're the same person who stated perfectly how big labels work. On Ekonini, you stated that labels sign artists who are competition to their own artists so they can shelve the new artist's music and push that audience to do towards their main act, making even keeping the book simple. Not to say Sony didn't help. They gave your career significant public attention. True, they managed to get AKA, may he rest in peace, and Pretty Ugly on your tracks, as well as the best producers in the game. First song you made a video for, and it was shot on your mom's balcony, it blew up on Twitter until Chris Karubi retweeted it, which you keep on reminding us. Here is where things get real bad for the relationship with Sony. You had 23 full tracks, not including the collabs, but couldn't release them. You didn't have the authority. No, you didn't. You weren't given that power. You gave that power up to Sony. You were being shelved to the point that they released tracks that you made for 2012 in 2017. Being that Sony had just gotten its headquarters in Africa at the time, placing their head office in South Africa, we'll assume that you were in South Africa most of the time, living the high life. But in reality, you barely went there for longer than a few weeks, spending most of your time in Kenya. You asked them nicely and sincerely if you could just release your songs, or if you could redo the music, because you thought at the time, assuming innocently, that they just didn't like the songs, hence they delayed. You told them that they didn't even have to pay for a flight to SA for the recording, it could all be done from home, but they refused. And it only gets worse from there. This is around the same time that you resided with your grandma when your mom was in hospital. Your mom needed the medical care and you were alone with your grandma who was struggling to keep up with the bills already. Then suddenly she had to care for all 3 of you. Sony denied you to drop even a single song, and since you were in a 360 deal, they owned everything from your live performances, your merchandising, your music publishing, your endorsements, your online fan clubs, your name, your image, your likeness and rights. This is what people mean when they say signing your soul. A single malicious clause could make you a slave. You weren't asking for handouts from Sony, but you were just asking them to give you the bare minimum to help your mom and your grandma in this situation that you had. It was so bad that you had to get lawyers involved just to help release you from the deal, which means that you spend more money on your end all to get out of a deal that didn't make you any money. All for what? Let's not forget that you already given birth at 19. So this was all with the kid. You stated that it was out of health condition that you had to have a baby when you did. It was a complication of a tumor. You really had to think about it. You had a tumor in your uterus that will grow and disappear. It was painful. You were told that you would rather have your uterus removed because it would likely give you more trouble in future. You decided to have a child, and after giving birth 6 months to 1 year later, to some miracle, the growth never came back, and you had a beautiful baby. This was the beginning of a miracle. You named her Eden. This was followed by your son Kal-El. You got your little miracles with your man at the time, TV producer Mushkin. But later you stated that you had tumultuous relationships with him involving abuse claims on your side. Sadly, he was later diagnosed with Miller-Fisher syndrome and you went on social media seeking financial support. Enough of the bad news. Let's go back in time for some nostalgia. When you dropped your blow-up track, The Prep, you stayed on the billboards for some numerous amounts of weeks. The airwaves were currently at the time also dominated by tracks like Kid Gil by Jaguar, Starship by Nicki Minaj Abroad, and Somebody That I Used to Know. Speaking of Somebody That I Used to Know, you drastically changed in appearance and behavior from when you were on NTV, on The Trend. You dressed like a humble mother fighting the manipulation of religion, to showing up on the My Check podcast and everything being different when the topic of going on your knees is mentioned. Coincidentally, you also appeared on the episode 69, so maybe that's the reason. You made some strange remarks, and and I'm just going to list a few. You said if somebody was to poop on your chest, it can be done for a few million shillings. And remember, I did not say dollars, shillings. You also stated that you have no problem with golden showers, so I'm supposing if a guy drinks plenty of water, you would be attending a diamond shower. Anyway, it doesn't end there. You said you could swallow children if need be, calling yourself the cum shot specialist. My dear, we're not done. You further went and said there are people who enjoy having fun with love handles by placing their meat between the fat meat in your stomach. And it seems like you speak from experience because everybody else in the podcast was shocked and disgusted. But you stood there like Andrew Tate, unfazed. Anyway, in the Kenyan music scene, there are very few females on your tail for the title, so you never really had any beefs in the industry except for your beef with your record label Sony. See, record labels are smart, and just because a label is looking to sign you doesn't mean that they want the best for you. You also have very few female rappers in Africa who are actually talented like yourself. Talent is hard to find and it's hard to come by. That's why you end up seeing the top artists like J. Cole and Rush making everything from their beats to their lyrics from scratch, all alone, only depending on themselves. Because when you start depending on others, especially in the music industry, which is run by ego, you start going into a very dangerous path. Now, stepping away from the music industry, we dive into your religious side, or should we say your anti-religious side. It got to the point that you were more famous for your opinions on religion than you were famous for your music. On NTV, you spoke about how atheism and being Gnostic makes more sense as opposed to Christianity. You also said how can one be born into a religion, then all of a sudden they have to follow all the indoctrination without consent, which caused public uproar. You then take the same statement and the same idea into sexuality, claiming that men are forced into gender roles, saying that transgenders are good for society. Since we are on the topic of interesting remarks, remember when you said if I wanted to be a sex worker or if I wanted to be on OnlyFans, then I would do that and it would not affect how I parent my children. Other than that, for a 19-year-old Kenyan to be landing collabs with AKA and Pretty Ugly all the way from South Africa with songs charting for weeks on end, you even had people like Questlove shouting you out for your lyricism, and it seems like that's the only thing you ever talk about in every interview. When you have collabs with the biggest artists in Kenya like King Kaka, you had Ben Soul and Fancy Fingers on your Social Experiment mixtape, you had the track with Steph Capella, and you were also appearing on Kali Katal 2 Cyphers by Calligraph Jones. You are also a longtime friend with the rapper Jack Will. So when it comes to getting the bag and connections, you got it. And we can already tell your music didn't really make you that much money from the jump, but you're still pushing. And considering your horrible 360 contract with Sony, it might have been a struggle. But with your newfound jawline, Jabba Juice business, you are now a certified hustler. Now let's go to the politics. Politically, we know that you are seen with the Ruto Must Go t-shirts. But other than that, we don't have much info on your political stances. When it comes to your versatility, we have to hand you your flowers. You started off singing and still ended up running the African rap scene while having a child, all at the age of 20. Not only that, you also made tracks in various genres like soul, R&B. Now, for what brought us here, are you a rapper or a capper? Since you had beef with Sony, we can assume that you didn't have full creative control over your major tracks in the beginning. So we're going to review one of your latest tracks, or rather freestyles, on Kali Katal.
Fuck, I know where I'm from. Fuck, I know that I'm made for this. You just notice the rhymes, but first acknowledge the greatness. I ain't on what you want, it's kinda basic shit. If that's the fucking title that you want, then I ain't chasing it. Cause I ain't moving backwards, fall back cause you in class and all that you do it after. Come back a different chapter. Cause I'm only back to back to back with fucking icons. All you homies happening after that, I call them my sons. This contract is cons and I ain't for it. All the conscience is brightly shining, ain't need no fame for it. Got embodied and disembodied, just like my name's Tony. I'm a goddess, not got him having the kind of faith on me. Wakishuku ni nduku lakini akili nyingi. Tuko huku improving na dithi wazipimie. Uko bubu kwa nini? When we pull to your city, kizungu ni nyingi, mazishi ni ile ile. And say hi to your shorties, not hard to identify. 25. When I come around, she wet and loose, some spaghetti vibes. What she telling you? I'm sorry, I can't verify. How she getting down every time that I'm passing by.
Now we kinda understand your sexual fluidity. This line is referring to you taking some guy's shorty, and every time you come around, she's down for you to go down on, you know.
Now, you know I'm delivering classics.
When you say a song is a classic, it has to stand the test of time of at least 5 years and still be relevant. Unfortunately for you, you don't have that, so that's cap.
Got my shit together, now I'm just giving legitimate facts.
Faxing, I would assume, is referring to her giving legitimate facts as well as her printing legitimate paper. So that's a dope line. That's a good line.
Oh, they be claiming it bad, but intelligence not with the package. Or ways you're getting your fast, getting a dad, and nothing but vacuum. Man, nothing in vacuum, you never had it. They coming at you, bitch, I'm ecstatic. I ain't got no time better than that, but you know what's happening. You know what's happening, you know what's happening.
Ain't no way in hell, shorty, you just repeated the phrase, you know what's happening, you ain't on our freestyle.
You know what's happening. Keeping it minimal, don't fucking nap.
Yeah, you definitely keeping the bars minimal.
And I am not the kind, funga virago, Rudy Kajani.
Now the rest is in Kiswahili. When it comes to your flow, you got it. You got the flow. You got the flow. The messages in your music are deep when you're relating to the contracts or the industry with Sony, etc. But other topics are rather vague. You're barely audible, and you don't submit your trending songs lyrics to media outlets to try correct them or just publish them to like Genius or something. Perhaps the deal with Sony accomplished its job and destroyed your career, or maybe you're just not the baddest rapper we thought you were. So is it rap or is it cap? Will we be playing your music at our events? That's a hard cap, and a lot needs to be improved, and we'll see later on. We'll see how things go.